All right, welcome to the second video that should be helping to prepare you for taking the ELA map test. What we've done so far, you should have already watched the video where we talked about how to survey the text and how to look at, read, and mark questions. In this video, what we're going to focus on is entirely marking text. So the first two things that you do when you're taking any test really, if you have the ability to mark on it, which for the map test you do, you want to survey that test, look at, read, and mark the questions. And the third thing that you want to do is you want to mark the text. This video will show you exactly how your language arts and reading teacher expect for you to mark the text during the map test. Now earlier we already decided that the text that we are looking at is a poem. And when we're looking at a poem, we know that we read poems a little bit differently than we read other things. I will tell you that from years of watching kids take reading comprehension tests, map tests, anything, honestly, the number one thing, the number one way to be successful is for you to be a problem solver. As you're going through, there may be things you don't understand, phrases, words that you don't know. The most important thing is to use the text and be a problem solver and go through and figure out what things mean. The first thing that you would want to do when you're reading this poem is take a look at the title. This is called Arithmetic by Carl Sandburg. And one of the first problems that you may run into is not knowing what arithmetic means. If that's the case, then what you would do is go ahead and start reading the poem to see if you can find some clues that will help you understand what it is. So over here to the side, I'm going to make some notes to myself. And really what I'm wanting to know is what is arithmetic, and I'm looking for clues as I read. So, arithmetic is where numbers fly like pigeons in and out of your head. Well, I know that arithmetic must have something to do with numbers. Arithmetic tells you how many you lose or win if you know how many you had before you lost or won. Well, that's kind of a confusing statement, but I think about losing and winning and scores, and it's telling me that arithmetic would tell me how many I lost or won if I knew how many I had to start with. Well, that sounds like either addition or subtraction. Arithmetic is 7, 11, all good children go to heaven, or 5, 6, bundle of sticks. Honestly, that's just a little bit confusing, so I may just keep reading. Arithmetic is numbers you squeeze from your head to your hand to your pencil to your paper until you get the answer. Okay, so now I know that it's using numbers to get an answer. At this point, I should have enough information to know that when I'm talking about arithmetic, I'm talking about math. So that should help me to get a really good idea of the poem's content and what I'm going to be reading about. The next thing I want to do is that as I'm going through and I'm reading this poem, and some of you may choose to do a first draft read first and read the poem all the way through, and that's totally fine. What you really want to focus on, though, is going back and making sure to mark the text either through your first draft read or through your second draft read. What marking the text does is it increases your level of comprehension as you read something and sets you up to be more successful on the test when you're going through and taking it. What we want to do with a poem or a piece of nonfiction or a piece of fiction is that when you're going through on the map test and you're marking text, we want to use the marking text strategy that we've worked with earlier in the year, where we focused on what the author says versus what the author does. Okay, and remember when we do this, what the author says, that's really asking for content. That's really our summary. And what the author does is really kind of the structure. It's their craft. And as I'm going through and reading a poem, what a poem is that's different than either a piece of nonfiction or a piece of fiction is that what the author says may not always be clear, but a lot of times what the author does can help us to clarify the overall meaning. In a piece of nonfiction or in a piece of fiction, we generally understand what the author says, and sometimes it's a little bit harder to figure out what the author does. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark everything that the author says in red, and I'm going to mark everything that the author does in green. When you're taking the test, our expectation would simply be that you write in the margins. So I'm going to start at the top of this poem and we're going to mark it together. Again, please know that at this point in time, you should have the arithmetic poem up and in front of you, and I need for you to be marking the text with me as we go. We'll start at the beginning. Arithmetic is where numbers fly like pigeons in and out of your head. Well, automatically, I already see numbers fly like pigeons. That is the author using a specific word choice to compare numbers to flying pigeons. I know that if I'm looking at a comparison like this and I'm using the word like, then I'm talking about a simile. So that's something the author does, and I'll put it over there. I'm not sure really at this point what the author says other than arithmetic involves thinking about numbers. Arithmetic tells you how many you lose or win if you know how many you had before you lost or won. So just like I knew when I was doing clues, I know that that's focusing on either subtract or adding. Okay. What the author does may not be clear, but I can always look at the fact that arithmetic is repeated literally all the way through our poem, so I can already talk about what the author is doing in terms of repetition. Okay? Arithmetic is 7-11, all good children go to heaven, or 5-6, bundle of sticks. Well, 11 and heaven and 6 and sticks, that sticks out to me as rhyme. In terms of what the author is saying, it really just sounds like they're talking about the fact that numbers are used in children's games. Okay. The next thing I'm going to take a look at is arithmetic is numbers you squeeze from your head to your hand to your pencil to your paper until you get the answer. Okay, so again, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but it's using numbers to get an answer. In terms of what the author is doing, it's helping you follow. So this really is a great example of cause and effect. You're taking it from your head to your hand to your pencil to your paper. Arithmetic is where the answer is right and everything is nice and you can look out the window and see the blue sky. I know that blue sky can sometimes be imagery. Where the answer is wrong and you have to start all over and try again and see how it comes out this time. Okay, so we already know that imagery is here. We also know that we're looking at another cause and effect situation. Because the answer is right, everything is nice. And because the answer is wrong, you have to start all over. So both of those things you can see. And some of this, the way that I'm marking my text, should be based on what I figured out that I needed to know when I was reading the questions. For instance, I know that cause and effect is something that I have to identify. I know that figurative language is something I have to identify. I know that the things the author uses that make this a poem is something that I have to identify, and that's exactly what I'm on my way to doing. What I would like for you to do is I would like for you to go through and I would like for you to finish marking up this text. You will find that I have included later on in the D2L module an example packet of exactly how my text has been marked up. So you're welcome to look at that. I've added some additional things. Really, the most important thing that you want to know is by the end of reading something, if you've done a really great job with what the author does and what the author says, you should walk away with a good idea of what the author's overall message was. Okay, so again, you really want to focus on your last step is making sure, so we've surveyed the test, we've looked at, read, and marked the questions, we've marked the text, and at this point we want to apply knowledge to questions. And what that means is that I know, for instance, that I need to be looking at what the author's purpose is. Well, by the end of reading this, I should be able to answer what the author's purpose is. By the end of reading this, I should be able to comment on things like what the author's attitude is. And remember, we've done a lot of analysis of language where I can look at things like 7-Eleven, all good children go to heaven. Heaven's got a really positive connotation. Numbers fly like pigeons in and out of your head. Things that have positive connotations with them, that should help you determine the author's attitude toward things. Once you're finished marking your whole text, then as long as you can answer those questions, you've got a general idea of what you've read, you're ready to turn around and apply that to the questions that you need to answer. More than anything, again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to be a problem solver, and how important it is to use the strategies that we've talked about in class. Things like making claims, making sure that the things you talk about are reasonable, supporting everything that you say with evidence from the text and your own reasoning, making sure that you're insightful and that you communicate deeper thinking. That's all I've got. Hopefully this will help you feel like you are ready to be successful on the ELA MAP test. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.